My name is Clint. I am 72 years old, and I have learned the hardest lesson a father can ever learn. Sometimes, the very people you spend your entire life protecting are the ones you need to protect yourself from. My only daughter, Megan, and her husband, Brad, thought I was just a tired old man. They thought I was becoming senile. They thought they could forge a power of attorney, lock me away in a discount nursing home, and sell my home to buy a Porsche and pay off their massive gambling debts. They thought they had outsmarted me, but what they didn't know was that I heard every single word of their pathetic, greedy plan, and instead of getting angry, I got to work. I didn't just stop them. I completely dismantled their entire lives, legally disinherited them, and watched as the police hauled them away from the very house they thought they owned. Before I tell you exactly how I executed this trap and left them with absolutely nothing, I want to ask you a question. Where are you watching from tonight? Let me know in the comments below. And please, hit that like button and subscribe if you believe that greed should always be met with absolute justice. This is a fictional story, but the complex legal and financial steps I took to protect my assets and my freedom are very real. Pay close attention. It might save you one day. It started exactly 6 months ago. I had a minor health scare, a bout of pneumonia, that landed me in the hospital for 3 days. It was nothing serious, just a harsh reminder that I wasn't 50 anymore. When I was discharged, my daughter Megan insisted that she and Brad move into my house temporarily. "Just to help you get back on your feet, Dad," she had said, her eyes wide with what I thought was genuine concern. "We can't leave you all alone in this big house." I should have seen the red flags immediately, but I was a grieving widower. My wife, Sarah, had passed away 4 years prior, and the large, 4-bedroom house we had built together had felt incredibly empty. The prospect of having my daughter, my son-in-law, and my bright 5-year-old grandson, Leo, filling the halls with life again was too tempting to resist. So I opened my doors. I let them in. That was my first mistake. It didn't take long for temporarily helping out to evolve into a full-scale occupation. Within a month, Brad had completely commandeered my study, turning it into his home office. Brad was a man who talked endlessly about cryptocurrency, day trading, and massive investments, yet he somehow never actually had any money. He was a freeloader, plain and simple, dressed in designer clothes he couldn't afford. Megan, meanwhile, began systematically replacing Sarah's touches around the house. The vintage brass coat rack in the hallway was moved to the garage. The floral curtains were swapped for cold, modern blinds. Whenever I gently objected, Megan would use the same patronizing tone. "Dad, we're just updating the place. It's for your own good. You don't want to live in a museum, do you?" I tolerated it. I tolerated Brad drinking my expensive scotch, and I tolerated Megan's subtle, constant manipulation. I tolerated it because of Leo. My grandson was the light of my life. We would spend hours in the backyard, building model airplanes and looking at the stars through my old telescope. For Leo, I was willing to endure the disrespect, but tolerance has a limit, and my limit was reached on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I had been out in the garage, organizing my tools. It was quiet, peaceful work. I came back into the house through the side door. The house was dead silent. Megan and Brad thought I had gone to the pharmacy to pick up my blood pressure medication. They didn't know I was standing in the mudroom, taking off my boots. I heard voices coming from the kitchen. It was Brad, and he was laughing. Not a warm laugh, a sharp, cruel sound. "I'm telling you, Meg, the numbers work perfectly," Brad was saying. "If we list the house by next month, even in this market, we clear 800 grand. "Easy," I froze. My hand stopped halfway to the coat hook. "List the house?" "My house. The house Sarah and I built. The house where Megan grew up. Are you sure about the power of attorney?" Megan asked. Her voice wasn't hesitant, it was eager. It was the voice of a gold digger plotting her next strike. "I've got a guy," Brad replied smoothly. "He's a notary. He doesn't ask questions. He owes me a favor from a poker game. All we need is for your dad to sign the bottom of the stack when we give him his tax forms. He doesn't read anything anymore anyway. He just trusts you. And Sunset Pines?" Megan asked. "I already checked it out," Brad said. "It's cheap, like really cheap, discount wing. It's a Medicaid facility, so it won't drain the capital we need from the house sale. It's perfectly adequate for him. He just sits around all day anyway. It has to be fast." "Brad," Megan said, her dropping to a harsh whisper, The credit cards are maxed. American Express is calling my phone 3 times a day. If we don't get the capital to pay off your debts, we're going to lose the condo. We won't, Brad assured her confidently. Once we have the medical proxy and the power of attorney, we take control of the bank accounts. We transfer the pension and the savings account, then we move him to Sunset Pines. By the time he realizes what's happening, the house will be sold, the debts will be paid, and I'll finally be able to put the down payment on that Porsche 911. I stood in the mudroom, the damp air suddenly feeling like ice against my skin. My blood ran cold. They weren't just planning to steal from me. They were planning to erase me. They were going to forge legal documents to strip me of my rights, throw me into a miserable, discount nursing home where the elderly are left to rot in understaffed hallways, and sell the home I built with my own 2 hands. My own daughter, the girl I had taught to ride a bike, the girl whose skinned knees I had bandaged, she was standing 20 feet away, calmly plotting the end of my life to pay off her husband's gambling debts. For a long moment, I didn't move. A weaker man might have stormed into the kitchen. A weaker man might have screamed, demanded answers, or broken down in tears. A weaker man would have confronted them, given them the chance to lie, to backtrack, to gaslight him into thinking he misheard. But I am not a weak man. I am a retired structural engineer. I have spent 40 years analyzing failing systems, finding the exact stress points, and designing precise, calculated solutions to bring them down safely. I didn't storm into the kitchen. I didn't make a sound. I quietly put my boots back on, slipped out the side door, and walked down the street to the pharmacy. When I returned an hour later, carrying a small white paper bag with my medication, Megan was in the living room, casually flipping through a magazine. "Hey, Dad," she chirped, not looking up. "Did you get your pills?" "I did, sweetheart," I said, my voice perfectly steady, entirely devoid of the rage that was currently burning a hole through my chest. "I'm going to take a nap in my room. I'm feeling a bit tired." "Okay, Dad. Rest up," she said, finally giving me a sickeningly sweet smile. I walked into my bedroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of my bed. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something much more dangerous. I was seething with rage. It was a cold, hard, analytical fury. They thought they were playing a game with an oblivious old man. They had no idea they had just walked into a war zone. I needed evidence, and I needed time. I couldn't just throw them out. If I evicted them now, they would simply find another way to attack me. I needed to trap them so completely that they could never recover. First, I needed to secure my immediate environment. I opened my laptop and ordered a set of discreet, voice-activated micro-recorders. Next, I opened a secure browser and logged into my bank accounts. Brad had mentioned my savings account and my pension. I checked the recent activity. Nothing was missing yet. They hadn't made their move. They were waiting for the forged power of attorney. I spent the next 3 days playing the part of the tired, forgetful old man to absolute perfection. I intentionally misplaced my glasses. I asked Brad the same question twice in 1 hour. I watched with a hidden, cold smirk as they exchanged knowing glances, convinced their narrative of my cognitive decline was becoming reality. When the micro-recorders arrived in a discreet package, I waited until they took Leo to the park. I planted one under the edge of the kitchen island. I planted another beneath the desk in Brad's commandeered home office. Within 48 hours, I had a treasure trove of audio evidence. I sat in my locked bedroom late at night, wearing headphones, listening to them scheme. It was worse than I thought. I heard Brad making panicked phone calls to bookies. He didn't just have credit card debt. He owed over $60,000 to people you don't want to owe money to. I heard Megan coldly discussing exactly which pieces of Sarah's antique jewelry she was going to pawn first. They were financial vultures, circling my life, just waiting for me to stop breathing or, in their plan, to be locked away in Sunset Pines. I knew what I had to do. I didn't need to confront them. I needed to execute them financially. On a bright Thursday morning, while Brad was day trading in my office and Megan was at a yoga class, I told them I was going to the senior center to play chess. Instead, I drove straight to downtown Seattle, the offices of Sterling, Vance, and Hughes, the most ruthless, expensive estate law firm in the state. I didn't ask for a junior partner. I asked for Arthur Hughes, a man I had played golf with a decade ago, a lawyer known for dismantling corporate takeovers with the precision of a sniper. I sat in Arthur's plush, mahogany-paneled office. I didn't offer pleasantries. I placed a secure USB drive on his desk. "Arthur," I said, "my daughter and her husband are attempting to forge a power of attorney, steal my assets, and have me committed to a discount nursing home. I have the audio evidence right there." Arthur didn't blink. He picked up the drive, plugged it into his computer, and listened to a 5-minute compilation I had prepared. The audio of Brad laughing about Sunset Pines filled the quiet office. Arthur took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Clint," he said softly, his voice devoid of his usual legal bravado. "I am profoundly sorry. This is a betrayal of the highest order. I don't need your sympathy." "Arthur," I said firmly, "I need your legal machinery. I want to build a fortress. I want them to hit a brick wall at 100 miles an hour." Arthur leaned forward, a dangerous glint in his eye. "Tell me exactly what you want to do first," I said. "I want to completely disinherit Megan. She gets nothing, not a dime, not a photograph. I want my last will and testament ironclad." "Done," Arthur said, taking notes. "Second," I continued, "I want to protect my grandson, Leo. He is innocent in all of this. I want to take the entirety of my savings account, my investments and my pension surplus, and I want to put it into an irrevocable trust for Leo. The trust will pay for his education and his living expenses. But the principal cannot be touched until he is 30 years old. And I want you, Arthur, as the sole independent trustee. Megan and Brad cannot have access to a single penny of it." "Brilliant," Arthur murmured. "An irrevocable trust is completely untouchable by creditors. Even if Brad declares bankruptcy, Leo's money is completely safe. And third," I said, leaning back in the heavy leather chair, "the house, they want to sell the house. I want to make sure that when they try, they discover they don't own it. In fact, I want to make sure I don't own it either." Arthur paused, his pen hovering over the paper. "You want to transfer the deed?" "I want to create a corporate entity. Let's call it Red Shark Holdings LLC. I want to transfer the complete title of my property to that LLC, and then I want the LLC to be owned by the trust." A slow, predatory smile spread across Arthur's face. "Clint, if you do that, the house is no longer a personal asset. It's corporate property. If they try to claim ownership, or even try to stay there without a lease, they aren't dealing with family. They are dealing with a hostile corporation. They would be legally classified as trespassers." "Exactly," I said. "How long will this take?" "I can have the LLC incorporated and the deed transferred by the end of the week. The trust will take a few days to finalize. But Clint, what are you going to do? Where are you going to live?" I looked out the large window at the Seattle skyline. I had thought long and hard about this. I didn't want to live in that house anymore. It was tainted. The memories of Sarah were fading, replaced by the toxic presence of my greedy daughter and her parasitic husband. "I've always wanted to see the Amalfi Coast," I said quietly. "I'm going to take a long vacation, a permanent one." The plan was set in motion. The legal gears began to grind. I went back to my house and continued to play the role of the frail, forgetful victim. A week later, the trap presented itself perfectly. "Dad," Megan said over dinner on a Tuesday night, "Brad and I are going to take a quick weekend trip to Las Vegas. Just for 2 nights. Brad needs to meet with some potential investors. We're leaving Leo with Brad's mother. Will you be okay here by yourself?" It was a test. They wanted to see if I was capable of being alone, or if this was the perfect opportunity to officially declare me unsafe. "Oh, I'll be fine, sweetheart," I said, my hand trembling slightly as I picked up my water glass. "I'll just watch my programs. You two go have fun. Use my emergency credit card for the hotel. If you need to, treat yourselves." I saw the flash of pure greed in Brad's eyes. They were going to Vegas to gamble, to try and win their way out of debt before they had to pull the trigger on their nursing home plan. And they were going to do it on my dime, or so they thought. "Thanks, Dad," Brad said, a fake smile plastered on his face. "You're the best." They left on Friday morning. The moment their car pulled out of the driveway, the tired old man routine vanished. I stood up straight. My back didn't ache. My mind was razor sharp. I picked up my phone and called the bank. I didn't cancel the credit card they took. That would alert them too soon. Instead, I set a strict travel alert. The card was authorized for exactly one transaction, the hotel deposit. After that, any charge over $20 would be automatically flagged as fraud, and the card would be hard-locked. Then, I made my second call. Miller Security Systems. A gruff voice answered. This is Clint Hayes. I need an emergency installation. Top tier. I want the house locked down. Today, they arrived less than 2 hours later. They were technicians who moved with military precision. They wore gray uniforms and carried tool belts that looked more like weapon holsters. The lead technician was a man named Miller. He had a faint scar running down his neck and eyes that did not blink often enough. He was all business. He immediately began removing the old locks. He was installing a biometric smart lock on the front door. It was a sleek, heavy block of black steel that covered the holes where my vintage brass handle used to be. That brass handle had been lovingly polished by my wife's hands for 20 years. Now it was tossed unceremoniously into a cardboard box bound for a landfill, and in its place was a cold machine that required a registered fingerprint or a 12-digit code to grant access. Miller turned to me, wiping his hands on a rag. The system is live, Mr. Hayes. We have installed reinforced steel strike plates on all exterior doors. The heavy glass windows on the ground floor have been fitted with invisible shatter sensors. The motion detectors in the main hallway are specifically calibrated to ignore anything under 40 pounds, so if a stray cat somehow gets in, it won't trigger it. But a human being definitely will. I nodded slowly, absorbing the information. And the police connection? Direct link, Miller said. He tapped a rugged tablet in his hand. If the alarm is tripped, the signal completely bypasses the standard monitoring center. It goes straight to the local precinct dispatch. It's classified as an active break-in in progress. Response time in this specific neighborhood is usually under 4 minutes. And it is a silent alarm. The intruder will not hear a siren. They will not know the police are coming until they see the red and blue lights flashing in the driveway. I looked at the black keypad on the door. It glowed with a faint, menacing red light in the dim hallway. It was not just a heavy lock. It was a perfectly designed trap. When Megan and Brad returned from their little Vegas getaway and tried to use their old, familiar keys, they would not just find a locked door. They would trigger a rapid sequence of events that would end in cold steel handcuffs. Set the master code, I told him. Miller handed me the tablet. I typed in a number. It was the exact date of my wedding anniversary. The one date Megan had conveniently forgotten for the last 10 years. The machine beeped once, a sharp, high-pitched sound to accept it. The house was now completely sealed. Miller and his team efficiently packed up their heavy tools. They moved quickly, sweeping up the fine sawdust and wiping down the doorframe. They left absolutely no trace that they had ever been there. They were like ghosts, leaving behind an impenetrable fortress. "We are done here, sir," Miller said, handing me the final invoice. "The house is secure, thank you, Miller." I watched them walk out to their unmarked white van and drive away. Now, I was truly alone. The house was quiet, too quiet. For 20 years, this had been a home filled with warmth, the smell of Sarah's cooking, the sound of my daughter's laughter, and later, the joyous noise of my grandson playing. Now the floors felt bare, the walls felt blank. It was just a structure of wood and drywall. A courier arrived an hour later, carrying a thick manila envelope from Arthur Hughes. I signed for it, took it to the kitchen island, and opened it. The legal documents were flawless. The deed to the property had been officially transferred. I was no longer the owner of my own home. Red Shark Holdings LLC was now the sole legal proprietor. Included in the packet was a certified letter from the bank. The transfer of funds was complete. The savings account, the pension surplus, the investments, all of it had been drained from my personal accounts and securely deposited into the newly formed irrevocable trust for Leo. I was officially broke on paper, and I had never felt more wealthy or more powerful. I walked into my bedroom and pulled my old leather suitcase from the top shelf of the closet. I didn't pack much. I packed 5 changes of clothes, my shaving kit, and a small framed photograph of Sarah. That was it. I left the expensive suits Brad always eyed. I left the vintage watch collection in the safe. The trust would liquidate those. Eventually, I carried the single suitcase to the front door and set it down. I had one last thing to do, one final artifact to leave behind in this museum of broken trust. I walked back to the kitchen island. I had deliberately kept one single piece of white printer paper and one roll of heavy-duty packing tape. I took a thick black marker from my shirt pocket. I uncapped it. The smell of the permanent ink was sharp and chemical in the pristine kitchen. I did not need to draft the letter. I hadn't written it down, but I had been composing it in my head for 3 days. I had been writing it since the exact moment I stood in the mudroom and heard my daughter's cruel voice through the walls. I pressed the marker to the paper. The tip squeaked loudly against the surface, to Megan and Brad. I wrote their names large, in bold block letters. I wanted them to be able to read it clearly from the driveway. I did not write about my broken heart. I did not write about the deep, agonizing betrayal. Those are human emotions, and I was dealing with parasites who had completely lost their humanity. I wrote cold, hard facts. Fact number 1. I heard the conversation. I heard you planning to forge a power of attorney and lock me away in the discount wing of Sunset Pines. I heard you laughing about selling my home to buy a Porsche. I paused, making sure the ink was dark. Fact number 2. The medical proxy you were planning to use is worthless. You own nothing. You control absolutely nothing. Fact number 3. This house now legally belongs to Red Shark Holdings, LLC. You are currently standing on private corporate property. You have no lease and no legal right to be here. The police are already on their way. Fact number 4. I completely emptied the bank accounts. The money is locked in an irrevocable trust for Leo. You cannot touch a single dime. The credit cards you stole are frozen. The massive gambling debts you owe are yours alone. And finally, I paused. The black marker hovered over the bottom of the paper. I thought about the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders at the county fair. I thought about the woman who was perfectly willing to throw me away like garbage. I wrote the final line. I did not go to a nursing home. I went to find a life where I am respected. Do not look for me. You will not find me. But I heavily suspect the creditors you owe $60,000 to will have absolutely no trouble finding you. I signed it simply Clint. I did not write Dad. I did not write Father. Those were sacred titles. Titles earned by mutual love and respect, and they had been entirely forfeited by greed. I picked up the paper. It felt incredibly heavy in my hand, carrying the weight of a severed relationship. I walked to the front door. The new glass panel beside the door was reinforced and slightly tinted. I took the roll of tape and secured the note to the inside of the glass, facing outward. I taped every single corner. I taped the edges securely. I wanted to make sure it was perfectly flat, perfectly legible, and impossible to remove from the outside. I stepped back and looked at it. The stark white paper stood out brightly against the dark interior of the hallway. It was a tombstone epitaph for our family. I checked my watch. It was 11:45 a.m. The airport taxi I had ordered was already waiting at the curb. I took one last, long look around the foyer. The midday sunlight was hitting the dust motes dancing lazily in the air. It was quiet, a peaceful silence. Not the heavy silence of loneliness, but the crisp, clean silence of absolute resolution. I opened the front door. The new alarm panel immediately started a slow, rhythmic beeping countdown. Beep, beep, beep. I had exactly 60 seconds to exit before the system armed itself. I stepped out onto the porch. The air outside was fresh and smelled faintly of rain. I grabbed the handle and closed the heavy reinforced door behind me. Thud. The sound was incredibly solid, final. I heard the electronic whir of the heavy deadbolt sliding into place automatically. Then came a sharp, high-pitched chirp. The system was armed. The trap was set. I walked down the concrete steps. My knees did not hurt today. My back was straight. I carried my suitcase in my left hand. It contained absolutely everything I owned in this world, and it felt incredibly light. The taxi driver was leaning against the trunk of his car, casually smoking a cigarette. He tossed it on the ground when he saw me approaching and quickly opened the back door. SeaTac Airport? He asked, confirming the destination. Yes, I said. And then the international terminal. I slid into the back seat. The leather was cool against my legs. As the driver pulled away from the curb, I felt a sudden, powerful urge to look back. It is a natural human instinct to look at the place you are leaving, to say a silent goodbye to the structure that held your life for 2 decades. But I fought it. I kept my eyes fixed firmly on the road ahead. I watched the familiar houses of my neighbors blur past. I watched the quiet streets of my neighborhood disappear behind us. The house behind me was no longer a home. It was a weapon. It was a ticking time bomb waiting for 2 desperate people to come back from Las Vegas with terrible hangovers and completely empty pockets. Meanwhile, 400 miles away in the blazing heat of Nevada, the first domino was about to fall. Brad had booked them into a luxury suite at the Bellagio. They had spent Friday night drinking expensive champagne, eating at a five-star steakhouse, and losing a significant amount of money at the blackjack tables. Brad felt invincible. He was playing with house money, or rather, the old man's money. He was confident the Sunset Pines plan was foolproof. On Saturday morning, they went down to the high-end boutiques in the hotel lobby. Megan had her eye on a designer handbag she had wanted for months. "Just put it on the emergency card," Brad had told her, nursing a mild headache. The old man never checks the statements online anyway. Megan confidently handed the sleek plastic card to the cashier. The cashier swiped it. The machine beeped, a harsh negative tone. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the cashier said politely. The card was declined. Megan frowned, her entitlement instantly flaring up. "That's impossible. Run it again. It's a premium account." The cashier swiped it again. "I'm sorry, it's coming up as declined. Fraud alert." Hard lock. Brad stepped forward, irritated. "Let me see that." He pulled out his phone and quickly logged into my bank's app, using the credentials he had secretly stolen from my desk weeks ago. He stared at the screen, his bloodshot eyes widened. "What's wrong?" Megan asked. Annoyed by the delay, Brad didn't answer. He was staring at an account balance that made absolutely no sense. He rapidly refreshed the app. He checked the savings account. He checked the checking account. He checked the investment portfolio. 000, every single account was empty. The funds hadn't just been moved. They were gone, transferred out via a certified wire to an entity he didn't recognize. "Brad," Megan demanded, her voice rising in panic. "What is it?" "The money," Brad whispered, his face turning pale, the color draining completely from his cheeks. "It's all gone, every last dime." Panic set in, pure, unadulterated terror. The entire foundation of their arrogant plan had just evaporated into thin air. "Without my money, they couldn't cover their Vegas trip. Without my money, they couldn't pay the bookies, who were already threatening Brad. Without the house, they had nothing. Call him." Megan hissed, grabbing Brad's arm. "Call my dad right now." Brad dialed my number. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again. "Voicemail. We have to go back," Brad said, his voice trembling. "Right now. We have to get back to the house. He must have figured something out. If he sells the house before we get the power of attorney, we're dead. Literally, the guys I owe money to will kill me." They scrambled. They packed their bags in a frenzy. They rushed to the airport, paid an exorbitant fee to change their flights, and boarded a plane back to Seattle, their minds racing with desperate excuses and new lies they would tell the confused old man when they arrived. They thought they could still fix it. They thought I was just confused, that the bank had made a mistake, that they could just talk their way back into control. They didn't know I was already halfway across the Atlantic Ocean, sipping a very good glass of red wine, and that the house they were rushing back to was no longer mine. They landed in Seattle late Saturday evening. It was raining, a cold, miserable drizzle that soaked them as they waited for a cab. They finally pulled up to the driveway of the house at 11:00 p.m. The house was completely dark, the porch light was off. "He's probably asleep," Megan said, shivering as she dragged her heavy suitcase up the concrete path. "We'll deal with him in the morning. I'll just tell him the bank made an error, and we need him to come down with us to fix it." "Just open the door," Brad snapped, his nerves completely frayed. Megan reached the front porch. She pulled her key from her designer purse. She reached for the familiar brass handle. Her hand hit cold, flat steel. She stopped. She looked up in the dim light. The door had changed. The handle was gone, replaced by a heavy, sleek, black biometric scanner. "What the hell is this?" she muttered, confused. She pushed against the heavy door. It didn't budge. It felt like pushing against a solid brick wall. "Let me try." Brad pushed past her, jamming his key blindly at the metal plate, realizing too late there was no keyhole. He started yanking on the handle, frustration boiling over into anger. "Open the damn door, Clint," he yelled, pounding his fist against the heavy wood. Then Megan saw the white paper. It was taped securely to the inside of the reinforced glass panel. She leaned in close, squinting through the rain and the darkness to read the large, block letters. Her eyes scanned the first line. Fact number 1. "I heard the conversation." She stopped breathing. The cold rain soaked through her jacket, but she didn't feel it. She felt a profound, horrifying sinking sensation in the pit of her stomach. She continued reading. Discount wing of Sunset Pines, Red Shark Holdings, irrevocable trust. Police are on their way. Brad, she whispered, her voice completely hollow. What? He yelled, still violently rattling the unyielding metal handle. Look at the note. She pointed a trembling finger at the glass. Brad stopped. He leaned in and read the paper. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a massive, devastating realization, crushing them both simultaneously. And then a new sound broke the silence. It wasn't a siren. It was the quiet, powerful hum of a high-output engine. They turned slowly. 2 police cruisers were already pulling quietly into the driveway, their headlights cutting through the rain, their red and blue lights flashing silently, painting the wet driveway in stark, terrifying colors. The silent alarm. When Brad had pounded on the door and violently rattled the handle, the advanced shatter sensors and vibration monitors had instantly triggered. 4 officers stepped out of the vehicles. They didn't look like friendly neighborhood cops checking on a noise complaint. They had their hands resting cautiously on their duty belts. Step away from the door and keep your hands where we can see them, the lead officer commanded, his voice booming through the quiet, rainy night. Officer, wait, there's a misunderstanding. Brad stammered, raising his hands, his arrogant demeanor instantly crumbling into pathetic cowardice. We live here. This is my father-in-law's house. My key just isn't working. The officer approached slowly, a heavy flashlight sweeping over them. Sir, dispatch received a silent alarm from this residence. This property is owned by Red Shark Holdings, LLC, and the registered owner explicitly informed the department that the property is currently vacant and any individuals attempting entry are to be arrested for trespassing and attempted burglary. Red Shark Holdings? Megan cried out, tears of genuine panic streaming down her face. No, my dad is Clint Hayes. He lives here. I'm his daughter. We just went to Vegas for the weekend. Ma'am, the officer said coldly, shining the light directly onto the white paper taped inside the glass. Does that note say you have permission to be here? Megan looked at the note. You have no lease and no legal right to be here. I can explain, Brad pleaded, his voice cracking. We have things inside, our clothes, my computers. If you have personal property inside, you can contact the corporate entity that owns the building during normal business hours to arrange a civil retrieval, the officer stated, completely unmoved by their panic. But right now, you are trespassing on private property, and you triggered an active burglary alarm. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. The cold, hard reality of the situation crashed down on them as the heavy steel cuffs clicked around their wrists. No, wait, you can't do this. I am his daughter, Megan screamed, thrashing against the officer's grip. Her expensive designer jacket, the one she had bought with my money 6 months ago, was instantly soaked with muddy rainwater as she was pushed against the side of the police cruiser. Ma'am, stop resisting, the officer warned sternly, patting her down for weapons. Brad was weeping openly. The facade of the confident, arrogant day trader was completely shattered. He was a coward at his core, and facing actual consequences broke him instantly. Please, he sobbed, his face pressed against the wet hood of the cruiser. I have a son. We have a son. Then you should have thought about him before you attempted to break into a heavily secured corporate property, the lead officer replied without an ounce of sympathy. They were shoved into the back of the cruisers, the hard plastic seats uncomfortable and cold. As they were driven away, Megan looked back through the rain-streaked window at the house she had grown up in, the house she had tried to steal, the house she had planned to sell to buy a luxury sports car. It stood dark, silent, and completely impenetrable. They spent the night in a crowded holding cell in the downtown Seattle precinct. Megan, who considered herself high society and above the law, was forced to sit on a cold metal bench next to a woman who kept muttering to herself. Brad huddled in the corner of the men's cell, shaking violently, not just from the cold, but from the absolute terror of what awaited him on the outside. He didn't just owe money to a bank, he owed $60,000 to illegal bookies men who did not care about apologies or extensions, men who expected payment or blood. And Brad had just lost the single asset he had promised them as collateral. The next morning, they were finally processed and released on their own recognizance, pending an arraignment hearing. They walked out of the police station at 8 a.m. into the harsh, gray morning light. They were exhausted, soaking wet, shivering, and they had absolutely nothing. Their luggage was still sitting on the porch of the house they couldn't enter. Their credit cards were useless pieces of plastic. They had exactly $42 in cash between them. "Call Arthur Hughes," Megan demanded, her voice hoarse from screaming in the cell all night. "Who?" Brad asked, looking around the street in a daze, jumping at every passing dark SUV, terrified it was his creditors. "Arthur Hughes," she snapped furiously. "My dad used to play golf with him. He's the most aggressive estate lawyer in the city. If my dad did this legally, he used Arthur. He wouldn't trust anyone else. Call his office. We demand to speak to him." Brad fumbled with his phone. The battery was at 12%. He found the number for Sterling, Vance, and Hughes and dialed. A receptionist answered. "I need to speak to Arthur Hughes immediately," Brad said, trying to muster some of his old fake authority. "Tell him it's Brad, his client Clint Hayes' son-in-law." He was put on hold. 2 minutes later, a crisp, professional voice came on the line. "This is Arthur Hughes. To whom am I speaking?" "Mr. Hughes, this is Brad," he started, his voice instantly losing its edge. "And Megan is here. Listen, there has been a massive misunderstanding. We were arrested last night at my father-in-law's house. We just got back from a short trip, and the locks were changed. We need you to contact the police and explain that we have a right to be there. We also need to speak to Clint immediately. He's having some sort of paranoid episode." There was a long, incredibly cold silence on the other end of the line. When Arthur finally spoke, his voice was like a scalpel cutting through flesh. "Mr. Hayes," Arthur said, the disdain rolling off every syllable. "Let me be absolutely clear so there is no further misunderstanding. I do not represent you. I represent Clint Hayes and Red Shark Holdings, LLC. My client is not having a paranoid episode. My client is currently enjoying a highly deserved vacation in Europe, fully sound of mind and incredibly aware of exactly who you and your wife truly are." "But the house," Megan interrupted, leaning in close to the phone so Arthur could hear her. "That's my family home. He can't just throw me out on the street. I am his daughter. You were his daughter, Mrs. Hayes," Arthur corrected her coldly, "until you coldly conspired to forge a medical proxy, declare a perfectly healthy man mentally incompetent, and commit him to a discount Medicaid facility, a facility, I might add, that is currently under federal investigation for severe elder abuse and neglect." Megan gasped. The color drained completely from her face. She looked at Brad, sheer panic setting in. He heard us? He heard everything," Arthur confirmed brutally. "He provided me with over 2 hours of highly disturbing, legally admissible audio recordings detailing your extensive plans for fraud, elder abuse, and theft. The house no longer belongs to him personally. It is an asset of Red Shark Holdings, LLC, which is owned entirely by an irrevocable trust established solely for the benefit of your son, Leo," Brad asked, grasping at a tiny straw of hope. "If it's for Leo, then we are his legal guardians. You have access to absolutely nothing." Arthur cut him off violently. "I am the sole independent trustee. The trust documents explicitly bar both of you from accessing, managing, or benefiting from a single penny of those funds. The money is locked down tight until Leo turns 30. Furthermore, your father-in-law has completely disinherited you, Megan. Your name has been permanently removed from his last will and testament. You get nothing, not the house, not the pension, not a single photograph." Megan started to hyperventilate. "He can't do this. We have nothing. We have no money, no clothes, no place to stay. We are family. A family doesn't try to lock their father in a nightmare facility to pay off gambling debts," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You have exactly what you have earned, nothing. Oh, and one more thing." "What?" Brad asked, his voice trembling. "I have been instructed by my client to formally notify you that if you ever attempt to contact him, or if you ever step foot on any property owned by Red Shark Holdings again, we will immediately release the audio recordings to the district attorney's office. They are extremely interested in pursuing felony charges for conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. If you are smart, and judging by your actions thus far, you are not, you will take what little you have left and disappear." The line went dead. Brad stared at the blank screen of his dying phone. The battery icon flashed red, then the screen went completely black. It was a perfect metaphor for his life. Megan sat down on the wet concrete sidewalk right outside the police station and began to sob. It wasn't a sad, delicate cry. It was the ugly, desperate wailing of a woman who had just realized she had completely destroyed her own life through sheer greed. "We're homeless, Brad," she choked out between sobs, ignoring the stares of the people walking past. "We have no money, the credit cards are maxed, my dad is gone, we have absolutely nothing." Brad didn't answer. He was looking down the street. A large black SUV with heavily tinted windows had just slowly pulled to a stop at the corner. The passenger window rolled down an inch. Brad's breath hitched in his throat. He recognized the vehicle. It belonged to Mickey, the enforcer for the bookie he owed $60,000 to. Mickey had given him exactly 1 week to pay up, relying on Brad's promise that the house sale was a done deal. "That week was up today, Megan," Brad whispered, his voice cracking with pure terror. "We have to run. Run where?" She screamed at him. "With what money? We don't even have a car. Just get up." He grabbed her arm and yanked her to her feet, violently pulling her down the alleyway next to the precinct. They ran. The arrogant daughter who thought she was entitled to millions, and the lazy son-in-law who thought he could steal his way to a Porsche, were now literally running for their lives through the dirty alleys of downtown Seattle, hunted by dangerous men with only $42 to their names. And as they ran, the rain began to fall harder, washing away whatever illusions of grandeur they had left. As for me, I didn't see them run. I didn't see the panic in their eyes or hear the desperation in their voices. I didn't need to. I had designed the system perfectly. I knew exactly how it would fail them, piece by piece. I was sitting on the balcony of a beautiful rented villa overlooking the sparkling blue waters of the Amalfi Coast in Italy. The air was warm, smelling of lemons and the salty sea. I had a cup of excellent espresso in my hand and a plate of fresh pastries on the table. For the first time since Sarah died, I felt completely at peace. I was no longer looking over my shoulder. I was no longer waiting for the next manipulation, the next subtle demand for money, the next cruel insult disguised as concern. I was free. The money I had saved my entire life was securely locked away, safely growing for my grandson, Leo. I had arranged for Arthur Hughes to anonymously pay the tuition for Leo's private school directly to the institution, ensuring that his education wouldn't suffer because of his parents' catastrophic failures. Leo would be taken care of, but Megan and Brad would not see a dime of it. I took a sip of my espresso and watched a small sailboat drift lazily across the horizon. People often ask me if I feel guilty. They ask if I went too far. They say, "But Clint, she's your daughter. Family is family. You shouldn't have left them with nothing." To those people, I say this: family is a title earned through love, respect, and mutual care. Blood does not give you a free pass to commit abuse. Blood does not give you the right to steal a man's dignity and lock him away in a nightmare facility just so you can buy a luxury car. They made their choice in that kitchen when they thought I couldn't hear them. They chose greed over love. They chose money over their own father. I didn't destroy their lives. I simply removed myself as their safety net and let the incredible weight of their own terrible decisions crush them. My wife and I spent 40 years trying to teach our daughter the value of hard work, honesty, and respect. In the end, the only lesson she truly understood was the brutal consequence of her own entitlement. I survived a betrayal that would have killed many men my age. I fought back using the law, careful planning, and absolute cold precision. I protected what was mine, and I ensured that my legacy would not be squandered by parasites. So, do you think I was too harsh? Do you think I should have confronted them, given them a chance to lie, to cry, to beg for forgiveness? Or do you think I did exactly what a father must do when his child becomes a monster? Protect the innocent grandson and let the guilty face their own ruin? Tell me what you truly think in the comments below. Have you ever had to cut ties with a toxic family member to protect your own sanity and your assets? How did you find the strength to walk away? Share your stories. Let's build a community of people who refuse to be victims of entitlement. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story about life, justice, and the hard lessons we learn along the way. Your support helps bring these crucial stories to light. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, stay strong, trust your instincts, and always protect what you have built. You earned it. Never let anyone, not even family, take it away from you. A few weeks after I settled into my villa on the Amalfi Coast, I received a secure, encrypted email from Arthur Hughes. It contained the final updates on the legal destruction of Megan and Brad. Even from 4,000 miles away, I could feel the sheer, crushing weight of the consequences they were finally facing. Arthur's email was incredibly detailed. He didn't just summarize the events. He provided the exact transcripts from the preliminary hearings and the subsequent criminal trial. Reading those transcripts was like watching a slow-motion train wreck involving two people who had gleefully dismantled their own brakes. When Megan and Brad ran from the police station that morning, trying to escape Mickey the enforcer, they didn't make it very far. They had no car and $42. They tried to hide in a cheap motel near the airport, hoping to figure out a plan to flee the state. But you can't run from professional debt collectors when you leave a massive digital trail of panic. Mickey found them by simply tracking the desperate, frantic phone calls Brad was making from a burner phone he bought at a gas station, trying to beg old college friends for a massive loan. Mickey didn't break Brad's legs. That only happens in the movies. In reality, Mickey calmly cornered them in the motel parking lot, took Brad's expensive designer watch, the only valuable thing he had on him, and promised him that the debt was now accumulating $1,000 a day in interest. He told Brad that he had 1 month to come up with $75,000, or they wouldn't just take his watch next time. Terrified, utterly broke, and out of options, Megan made the stupidest decision of her life. She went to the police. She walked into the precinct and tried to file a harassment complaint against Mickey, hoping the cops would somehow protect her. But the moment she gave the desk sergeant her name, the system flagged her. She and Brad had skipped their arraignment hearing for the trespassing and attempted burglary charges at my house. They had bench warrants out for their immediate arrest. She was handcuffed right there at the front desk. Brad, who was waiting nervously outside the precinct, saw her being detained through the glass doors and tried to run again. He made it exactly half a block before 2 patrol officers tackled him to the pavement. The criminal trial was a masterpiece of legal prosecution, largely fueled by the evidence I had meticulously gathered and handed over to the district attorney through Arthur Hughes. The DA didn't just pursue the trespassing charges. They went for the throat. They charged Megan and Brad with felony conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted elder abuse, and identity theft. During the trial, the prosecution played the audio recordings I had captured from the hidden micro-recorders. The entire courtroom, including the judge, listened in stunned silence as Megan coldly discussed pawning her dead mother's jewelry. They listened to Brad laughing about the discount wing of Sunset Pines. They listened to the exact, undeniable proof of their pure, malicious intent. The defense lawyer they had been assigned by the state, a deeply exhausted public defender who clearly hated them, tried to argue that it was all just talk. He claimed they were just venting their frustrations about caring for an aging parent and never actually intended to go through with the forged power of attorney. Arthur Hughes, acting as a key witness for the prosecution, dismantled that defense in exactly 4 minutes on the stand. He produced the digital footprint of Brad's online searches from the days leading up to the trip. Brad hadn't just been venting. He had actively searched for how to forge a notary seal, Medicaid asset recovery loopholes, and the exact floor plans for Sunset Pines. But the most damning moment of the entire trial came when the pressure finally broke their alliance. When people like Megan and Brad are cornered, there is no honor among thieves. They turn on each other like starved animals. Megan took the stand in her own defense. She looked haggard, her hair unwashed, wearing a standard-issue orange jumpsuit. She looked directly at the jury and, with tears streaming down her face, blamed everything on her husband. "I didn't want to do any of it," she sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at Brad, who was sitting at the defense table looking absolutely betrayed. "Brad manipulated me. He had these massive gambling debts. He told me that if we didn't get the money from my dad's house, the bookies were going to kill our son, Leo. I was just a terrified mother trying to protect her child. Brad forced me to agree to the nursing home plan. It was a brilliant performance. It was also a complete and utter lie. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman who had zero tolerance for entitlement, simply walked to her table and picked up a piece of paper. "Mrs. Hayes," she said calmly, "if you were a terrified mother acting entirely under duress to protect your son, can you explain this text message you sent to your husband 3 days before he supposedly forced you into this plan?" The prosecutor read the text message aloud to the silent courtroom. "Just looked up Sunset Pines. It's awful, perfect. The cheaper the place, the more equity we keep from the house sale. Make sure your notary guy is ready for Friday." Megan froze, the color drained from her face. She had completely forgotten about the text messages Arthur's investigator had easily subpoenaed from their provider. Her lie was exposed in front of the entire court. She had nothing left to say. She just sat there, her mouth opening and closing silently like a fish suffocating on dry land. Brad, enraged by his wife's betrayal, immediately tried to accept a plea deal by offering to testify against her. He offered to detail exactly how Megan had been slowly siphoning small amounts of money from my checking account for the past 2 years to fund her shopping addiction. But the DA didn't need his testimony. They already had a mountain of irrefutable evidence. They rejected his plea deal. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They returned guilty verdicts on all counts for both of them. The judge, clearly disgusted by the sheer callousness of their crimes, did not show leniency. She sentenced Brad to 5 years in a state penitentiary for the felony fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. She sentenced Megan to 4 years for her role in the conspiracy and the attempted elder abuse. As the bailiffs moved in to handcuff them and take them away to serve their sentences, Megan looked out into the gallery. She was looking for me. She was looking for the father she thought would always bail her out. The father she thought was too weak to ever let her face real consequences. But I wasn't there. I was sitting on my balcony in Italy, watching the sun set over the Mediterranean. As for Leo, my innocent grandson, he is safe. Arthur Hughes easily won temporary custody for Leo's paternal grandmother, a sweet, decent woman who was utterly horrified by her son's actions. She moved Leo away from Seattle, away from the toxic shadow of his parents' greed. The irrevocable trust I set up is actively funding Leo's entire life. It pays for a beautiful house in a safe neighborhood for him and his grandmother. It pays for the best private school in the state. It pays for his health care, his sports equipment, his future college tuition. Leo will never want for anything. He will have every opportunity in the world to succeed. But he will have to earn his success. The principal of the $50 million is locked away tight until he turns 30 years old. By that time, he will have learned the value of hard work. He will have a career. He will understand that money is a tool to build a life, not a weapon to destroy others. And if Megan and Brad ever manage to get out of prison and try to crawl back into his life looking for a handout, they will find that they have absolutely no legal standing to touch a single penny of his wealth. The trust is impenetrable. It is a fortress protecting my grandson from the very monsters who gave him life. My story is a warning. It is a warning to every aging parent who thinks that their children will always have their best interests at heart, simply because they share the same blood. Blood is biology, character is a choice, and sometimes the people you raise choose to become your worst enemies. You must protect yourself. You must protect your assets. You must never let the fear of being alone blind you to the reality of being used. If you see the red flags, the subtle manipulation, the unearned entitlement, the casual cruelty, do not ignore them. Do not make excuses for them. Gather your evidence. Hire the best lawyer you can find. Build your fortress. And when the time comes to drop the hammer, do not hesitate. Let the heavy weight of their own greed crush them. You spent your entire life building your security. You earned it with your blood, sweat, and tears. Do not let anyone, not a stranger, and certainly not an entitled child, take it away from you. Thank you for listening to my story. If you found value in this, please share it. Let's make sure no other parent falls into the same trap I almost did. Stay strong, protect your legacy, and never apologize for demanding the respect you deserve. I will see you all in the next one.